everyone. Welcome to what I would consider an important episode. The instantaneous certainty of an image being reality is the divine. And so, in this episode, as a human being among many human beings, as a creature in an unknown world, I feel I noticed and I realized something huge that I've been missing in all the other talks I've given. This is one of those episodes where I am trying to convey the significance of an inner experience I've had. In my observations of the nature of how human perception happens, I would say that the journey so far in this lifetime has been one of realizing the world that my energy, action, intent creates, and the world that was there before I had to do anything. And so really my psychology, I would say, is in some sense between a known object and an unknown subject, a known concept and inside an unknown context. I have spent what I would consider close to a decade of roaming through language and in some sense trying to convey the potential of greater dimensions to our experience through language. I would say if a human being opens its eyes and all the actions, if karma is like an all-you-can-eat buffet, I chose a sort of Raja Yogian path. You know, it's in some sense as if, or I would say it even in a better way, I found that because I exist, because I'm an energetic being, the purpose of consciousness and the free will and the persona is to direct the energy that we are. If we pay attention to everything else around us, from lesser species to whatever we see, most of how energetic events in nature happen, they are not governed by an individual mind. The human species is like that part of the energetic nature of reality that can coordinate where the energy goes in some sense. So to be a human being is to be that part of the world that can at least direct itself. The question comes not what is the purpose of the human being, but what is the purpose of what the human being is. And the human being is a relationship in the cosmos. It's as if first there was a world, then something happened where a self could experience itself in the world. As if intelligence of a cosmic nature was into world building first, then character customization. The significance of what I'm trying to convey in this episode is that I've had a realization on the nature of the presence of my experience, and I find that it has a universal value that it can apply to the presence of any human being. As human beings are the part of nature that can govern itself, with the governance of an individual life came the timeline of the individual. Physically, it's a genetical program recreating itself through different variations. That's the biological occurrence or biological gene swarming that's going on the planet. Biologically, it's to continue through change the purpose of life to some degree. But if we think about the nature of the mind, ever since the individualism of consciousness, there has come a player in the game of a meaningless world. In the search for meaning, through the realization that the world was present in an unknown way before we could know it. As a human being that is alive in the space-time continuum, I asked myself, where is the divine angle? Where is the mysterious variable to human intelligence? At some point, as I often quote in these episodes, I got drawn to mysticism and Vedic thought. In being drawn to Vedic thought, I got introduced to quotes like significant quotes from the Upanishads, ones such as that which the seer of the seen is unseen. I realized that the ancient men of this world, the ancient humans of this world, had caught on to how reality was a sort of simulation. But for how long can someone speak about the nature of a simulation? The conclusion I had before wanting to even give this talk was that I noticed that before the language of my mind enchants me with the storytelling of the sequences of my memory, what reality is awareness to image. The shape of that image is what is being considered as knowledge. But in reality itself is not in it. What I'm trying to say is that just before this episode, I'd give it literally 30 minutes ago. For a moment, my mind just paused everything. And I was like, what is the mystery of my mind? What is the secret of the soul? I asked this from myself. And I realized that the soul is an awareness to the images that become our life. And anybody who wants the proof of the soul, you want to find your soul, you want to see a soul. To see a soul is to see that which sees. The soul is the awareness to the image of life. The awareness to the image of life is the soul. We are being ushered into an era where human psychology is not bound by the first alphabet of perception and acceptance. Everything in the moment has significance and it has energy, but the activation of energy is different for a creature with boundaries, with a shape, and a creature that is not shape. On some level, we can have this attitude and say that either there's just one being here and we call it human with an unknown mind, or the mind is its own being and the body is its own being, and the symbiosis of two living dimensions has led to, let's say the conscious terminal, the conscious agent. There's something very unique about consciousness, something that we can find explanations, but the explanations are not satisfying. All poets have tried to define a direct experience through indirect symbols. What art is the display of an inner event in the outer realms. If I was to consider that like a Tetris game from the beginning of this life up to this point, every experience I've had in the conscious waking state, or every memorable experience, has been in some sense a Tetris piece, and all these Tetris pieces have fallen. And the remarkable thing is that when certain Tetris pieces, that means certain moments of your life, are brought back into consciousness from one's subconscious or unconscious, the freedom of new archetypes is found in the mystery, or let's say in the inquiry of what does it mean to be a psychological entity. We have used the awareness of language, our awareness to language, to in some sense cover the fact that what is living life is not a shape. It's kind of like a person on an island trying to see what it has access to. And like a creature, like a conscious being, like an entity in an unknown world, in my attempt to figure out what I am, my recent conclusion and update on all my ideology is that at its core, one is left with image. And what if there was a soul? What it is doing is that it is being image. The soul is the space where sight is content with itself, becomes content. More than human beings are reincarnating, or transmigratory souls in Buddhism are reincarnating as human beings. It seems to me that how would I say it? I'm trying to say, after you realize your personality and mind and all your memories have been filtered through language, through a sort of language of, let's say, made of letters, then you begin to see that the stories of one's life are actually the awareness to image. Everything to the secret of what is actually here comes to the awareness of image. Really what we are is we are the space of reality as much as its movement. We are the space of the movement of our intelligence. Sometimes I wonder where the idea of a secret came from. Sometimes I wonder if the purpose of creaturehood is to obliviously perform one's task, one's natural task, or strive towards an unnatural intervention or towards an absolute salvation. Attention pierces through the moment, as if it is the beacon that illuminates a sensory experience. All that we have seen and all that we have walked through as ourselves, they have all become memories for a future that exists timelessly. The fear of the human being will dissolve into the clarity of the eyes of space. The species from the beginning has had nothing to fear. Or poetically, fear is the game of the gods. Whether we are entertainment for higher dimensions, or whether we are the not activated yet potential of higher dimensions. Something became very clear to me today. That my whole life in the pursuit of meaning has been an identification with a fragment of my moment. As if my mind is being, right now I'm sitting on my balcony giving this talk, my mind, the space of my mind is being everything that I am aware of and seeing. But it's as if the story of my life was being conditioned to the persona that was only limited to the body's movement. I think I'm reaching the edge of the world. The feeling I have right now is a feeling that would be equivalent to just like those old movies where from a flat earth, the ship, the boat, the ship was went past the horizontal ocean and into the abyss of space. You know, It's something about life is very incredible, that the concept of karma is that the beginning is not forgotten by the end. The implication of a cause and effect based universe. Think of it as a human being. Think of the human experience as a character that is in a video game that has multiple levels. Imagine, like right now, I'm going to speak as if we're in the future, and let's say in the years past 2422, where cyberspace has become a sort of hidden home to lost psychological souls. There will be children lost in cyberspace potentially in the future. But the salvation of a greater reality depends on the space that can hold it. Imagine this character in the video game of life, this player. This player realizes that cyberspace is a world that it needs to complete the levels and go beyond. So imagine a human being surpassed, transcended all cyberspace simulations in reality. Now imagine after cyberspace was transcended, the human being transcended all linguistic simulations in reality. So the character in the video game of life got to, overcame the level of cyberspace, went to the level of language. Now let's say this character transcended all simulations of language, and then it came to a moment where it was a physical creature, and the reality's meaning was the simulation of behavior. And imagine this creature surpassing, let's say this creature going up to level 3. It's as if cyberspace was surpassed, language was surpassed, but physical behavior was surpassed, and then the creature is left realizing the purpose of the video game of its soul, poetically. Life is like a video game where at the end of it we realize we were playing through the character. We were not the character. Just like a person is not the pixels on the screen, we are not temporary animals in an unknown world. We are rather, think of it this way, that we are the permission of greater dimensions to enter lesser ones. What I'm trying to say is, after we play all the games of a separate self in a separate world, of a self in a world, eventually come to a moment where consciousness is neither an object, it's neither a personality in a story. It is the instantaneous awareness that in order for something to even be there to have meaning, the experience of something is in some sense primordial. It's kind of like the person's like, okay, I got to discover my mind because I could move my body in the world, but if I am to discover my soul, it's as if the person realizes how they've been moving their mind. What I'm trying to say is that in my own mystical search for the truth of my nature, for my true nature, I have come into this realization that before I was a person, before I was a personality, before there was an ego that could be an imposter, in some sense I have from the beginning of the moment of my consciousness, in every instance of my consciousness, been the presence of image. The soul is how an image is being reality. This is, I think, the breakthrough. So if the person was thinking about karma, the karma of a personality doesn't make sense anymore. The question is not, why am I a human being in a world? The question becomes, why is attention being image? Any being who understands what I'm saying right now, you're going to experience how Parabrahman, how you're going to realize how your oversoul is in some sense not a shape. So it's another way of saying once your body stops its dishonesty, and once your mind stops its dishonesty, the paradise, or I should say the paradise in our the paradise of our inner earth, I feel as a being, the pure psychological salvation is the realization, a sort of second nature, instantaneous, knowing that one is not an image. We are working with reality. We are not in reality. And even if our mistakes destroy us, what got to see anything happen was its own victory. We are living at a time where the species is still caught in a physiological game. It has not had an adequate opportunity to comprehend the greater dimensions of its intelligence. All the comprehension of the greater dimensions of intelligence shift the story again from youth, from the attention being I'm a human being in a world, to the attention being I am being how the world is being. Pretty much, it's like the body discovered the mind discovered the soul. The soul discovered it was neither body or mind, and therefore the contentment of other worlds. Life is a beautiful journey. Nobody has the right answer to it, and if life was seen as a problem, to solve it is like solving an endlessly changing problem. The only solution would be to have an answer that is beyond change. Whether we know it or not, all animate human beings are poetically captains of the soul of humanity, of the spirit of mankind. Our emotions attach us to the images that we think we are. It's another way of saying it's like the soul stepped into. Imagine Tony Stark stepping into an Iron Man suit, then with that Iron Man suit stepping into another Iron Man suit. At some point in the lifetime, hopefully before death, a final acceptance is made. The intelligence that has been controlling life releases life. So what I find Satchit Ananda means is not that consciousness is bliss by existing. By that bliss is the only resolution to existence noticing its conscious. What I find the ancient yogic bliss to be, it's to be so free that there is no archetype of freedom. To be so free, it's as if the person was a slave to objects. And imagine their shackles were broken and they were freed. Then the person was a slave to subjects. And so imagine those shackles were broken and they were freed. Now after objects and subjects, which are a sort of, think of it, a depiction of reality. Even though we say something is physical, it exists as an image in our mind. You know, a human being can touch a cup of coffee. I have a cup of coffee for him right now, and I am feeling how it's physical. I'm moving the cup of coffee, but simultaneously, as if this cup of coffee as a subject has an image-oriented existence behind my eyes. I can touch an object, close my eyes, and still see what it looks like. You know, it's kind of like when I think about what is the purpose of my body. The purpose of my physical body is to perform. The body is a sort of karmic performer. When I think about Buddha, the purpose of my mind is a karmic setter. It sets the karma. It allows the energy that becomes me. It allows the movement of reality. So imagine the body has become your ally. Physical existence neither fears you nor can get shackled to you through our artificial love. It's as if the person thought, it's like imagine an unknown multidimensional being and it's trying to ground itself and station itself in this unknown world. So imagine an unknown unknown intelligence, trying to know how it's being an unknown intelligence in an unknown world. The experiences of the physical dimension, people's karma is different. There has been times that I have in my inner realms felt I am doing, let's say, the work of the sacred, but at the same time, when I have looked at my body, I have felt, in some sense, it's as if existence has its own private room, and the destiny of our mind is timelessly being moved. Pretty much I'm that person who has realized that the idea of how I'm being a person is so instantaneously being that it's as if before I even move or have any intent, energetic intent of an effort to search or look for something, it's as if I am being something. Okay? So imagine the body is like the person. The body is like a warrior in a battlefield. Or imagine the body. Okay, how do I say it? Imagine an unknown intelligence is fighting the physical body. When it realizes what it physically is, it becomes humble, and as its mind accepts its position, new dimensions of reality open. What free will suggests is that we are like an energy that can interact with itself. Now, what is the purpose of the interaction of energy with itself? To some degree, it's the position of shape, you know? It's like your body becomes your ally. The outer realm's karma is different. Then your mind becomes your ally. And in some sense, when your mind becomes your ally, it gives you its own freedom. So think of it this way, the freedom of a physical entity is to experience what it feels like to breathe. The freedom of, let's say, an experiential entity. I'm pretty much trying to use the traditional relationship of the body, mind, and soul and tell the viewers that in some sense these are dimensions, and these are dimensions where your relationship with them suggests what sort of service they can have to you. It's as if, imagine there was a mighty soul, and this mighty soul wondered what sort of body would serve it. And imagine then this mighty soul wondered about what sort of mind would serve it. And imagine the most advanced mind in the realm and the most advanced body in the realm were serving you simultaneously. It's as if, imagine your limited body and your limitless mind became the greatest allies of your soul. My soul, or my understanding of my soul, brought me into a condition where the idea of myself that had a soul was discovered to be an inseparable intelligent event simultaneously with the idea of the world. It's as if the person thought they have a soul, they thought the world had a soul, they suddenly realize it's the same soul. It's like wondering, does it get more divine than imagery? Does truth or the secrets of this world get more fascinating than an image that leads to an emotion of pleasure or pain? It's like the fear of pain is causing the individual to seek pleasure. So in some sense, we love what works and we hate what doesn't. But what is it working for? I remember my father once telling me, as if when I'm giving these talks, or my dedication to these talks, it's as if I am working for an invisible company where I am not getting paid. It was as if like the person, imagine there's actual divine agencies, not a divine agency as if some sort of invisible hand moving reality, but a divine agency like it has an office. Right? And imagine somebody goes to the divine agency. It's like, hey, I'm a human being. Can I work here? And the divine agency's like, sure, just trust your karma. What I'm trying to say is, I look at the type of the quality and the type of experiences my ancestors had. I've spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And I have experienced how they engage reality and how when a person gets older, their victories define them. This is why I'm striving to have the whole human species build an advanced civilization, because then everybody would be victorious before they die. As if our failures will be nothing in comparison to all the achievements happening every day of the advanced civilization. It's kind of like the mind is not an object, so it appears to the individual as a space. So if the mind is a space, in Buddhism, the cause of suffering is desire, and desire is attachment. So it's kind of like space is being attached to what's in it looks like, and then it's reincarnating endlessly. You know what it is? Imagine someone goes to an art gallery, and so they look at a painting, and they look at that painting so long that at some point they forget there's other paintings. What I'm trying to say is that something in the story of the modern human being in 2022 doesn't make sense. And what doesn't make sense is how we are all acting like we have minds, but we don't know what the mind is. The definition of the mind so far has been what the mind produces. So imagine like an artist creating an artwork and we thinking the artwork is the artist. Like there's instantly like a multidimensional error there. We're making the error of not realizing the multidimensional. Strange theory that all the shy people on the planet, all the people that are shy, are actually being trained to experience life as an observer. So imagine in every human being, their intelligence can be divided between the observer and the observed. So every person who is a person, it's like you're observing stuff. That's the observer, and then there's the observed, which is what the stuff is, right? So every human being can be seen as being an observer and being the observed. Okay? Now, some human beings, not everybody, it's as if all human beings have these two dimensions of the observer and the observed, but the way karma is happening for human beings is it's that it's training them. So it's like an invisible force is subconsciously, without the human species noticing it, readjusting it. It's as if there are invisible hands of sculptors of history. Okay, it's as if miracles have happened in sequence to the point that we're wondering, okay, there's so many miracles happening, is the whole reality a miracle? In religious books, I have noticed, this is a sort of theological comment I have, where I have noticed they talk about how man sinned and God created the earth for man to go and, become a better being, right? But what it doesn't mention, what it doesn't clear in religious texts is that where did God build earth? That means before earth was a place created by God, where was God creating earth? And I feel this is a sort of secret realization about every religious book, that the reason God is being considered as an inconceivable creator and prime mover of reality is because the whole effort of the religious book is to remind the individual that something is non-physically being physical. It's as if there's patterns, guys. Like they say, God made man from clay and then imbued man with its own breath. So in some sense, God put his soul in the body of man. God imbued man with a soul, and the soul is experiencing the body on earth. So just like God imbuing, just like truth putting a bit of itself in the illusion, when the consciousness and the illusion or simulation or whatever, let's say whoever you are, the moment you distrust reality, you're inside a simulation. The moment you trust reality, you have found some truth. People don't realize, the more I say, when I talk about a multidimensional being is kind of like realizing, because your mind, your brain, let's say your mind generates the concept of time. The mind cannot be in time. That means the mind is not only invisible, but it is timeless. Before time, consciousness had an instantaneous classification of itself. Human beings never had to look at, chunks of metal on their wrist. In the chat section, there was a question. Somebody says, were they just souls when Adam and Eve were in the garden? Or the metaphor of it. What I find, so I'm not a theologian, there could be theologians who have more sophisticated views on this, but so far my view on the Abrahamic story is actually that God is the future. God is the concept of the future. And all the intent of the prophets was to put man on a different path. Do you see? It's as if at some point in history, human beings, they could use language, look at reality, and realize that the language wouldn't explain anything. Do you know? It's as if what I find our ancestors through religious texts have been trying to keep alive for us is a relationship with a living universe. Because when we wonder about what is inconceivable, so I'll say it this way, it's as if the idea of Adam and Eve falling from heaven is equal to like a time traveler from the future who for some reason came to the past so that it can re-experience its future. For me, sometimes the most bizarre things I see in time travel movies is that the time traveler goes back to the future, you know? Ultimately, I acknowledge, like, if somebody says Mr. Within, what's the most simplest way you see yourself, or what's the most basic way you're acknowledging the dimensions of your intelligence? There is a visible life I'm living as a physical biological entity. There is an invisible life I'm living as a nameless force. And then there is an inconceivable witness, which is another way of saying my consciousness has realized it is the presence of itself. And when I say my, it's another way of saying matter, rather than trying to understand space, realizes it is the space where matter is. Let me tell you what may happen, what is something incredible that can happen in the future, is that people are going to be so ignorant that they eventually get pushed in such artificial realities that some part of them deep down gets tired of acting in a theater that does not originate from a true presence. So you see, it's kind of like a lion doesn't eat, like compared to a coyote, a lion doesn't eat like the carcass of leftover dead animals. The lion has to hunt itself because it only trusts itself. So just like a lion having to catch its own prey, it's like every moment where there is awareness to shape, and that awareness can move the shape. It's kind of like a transcendental being was given a toy called Earth, and it enjoyed playing it so much that it forgot it was a toy. I'm trying to usher our species from individual ideological worship to a sort of collective freedom, where our freedom is not based out of our weakness, but our freedom is based out of our strength. As if you're someone who's judging yourself, the world, others, judge it out of the greatest possible view, because the point of the mind is to make up for limitlessly for the limitations of the body. It's as if like the closest thing to a perfect being would be a being that is imperfect but also is aware of his imperfections to perfect them. But what perfection means is that the world was never imperfect. You see, it's like wanting to find freedom in a world that was considered unfree is impossible, right? It's not efficient. This is why instead of saying civilization 1.1, my main school of thought is civilization 2.0. I'll share an interesting story with you guys. one day my father, my actual father, who is a very, I think it's like this for, most people, but my father is a greater being than I could ever be. But one day my father asks me, and he knows I give these metaphysical philosophy talks. My father asked me if I believe in past lives. I've shared this story in other episodes, but I'll say it again. My father asked me if I believe in past lives, and I gave an answer to him which I think he had never heard before. Right? And I told him that there was a time where I entertained the idea of past lives. Then, even through certain synchronistic events, I came to entertain the idea of future lives. Okay? As if the present doesn't have access only to the past, but its future as well. So, poetically, the present is the revolving door where the past enters the future, where the future can enter the past. But anyways, my father asked me, and I told him the way I see the human being is like a tip of an iceberg. The tip of an iceberg is not the whole of it. So if my consciousness is limited to me now being a being that is just defined by it's as if I was a tip of an iceberg, how could I judge why would it be important to even know the past life of an incomplete position, So for me, there's a parallel mystery as if in a horizontal. It's like in the middle of a horizontal mission, a vertical one appeared. I feel any sort of attainment I have is pretty much that. Imagine a square. Imagine a square. Like I'll personify it. Imagine a square. Thought it was a square its whole life until it had an experience of more planes to its reality and suddenly noticed that it was a cube. So imagine you're acting like a square your whole life, but you're actually a cube. There's a greater third dimension than the second dimension in that example. So right now, that's where that's the point in human history where I'm giving these talks, Something which I think some of the viewers have noticed, at least maybe subconsciously, in what I do in these talks. But there are moments where this might sound like such a bizarre thing to say, but my fascination with the future has made me emotionless to the past. In certain cases, That means it's like when you see the potential of something, it's like a teacher who sees a potential in a student, and the teacher's trying to unlock that potential, but the teacher realizes the student's mindset is trapped in its past. It's as if who knows what abilities come with each DNA. The most healthiest view, I think, is like seeing the brain as an antenna and seeing reality as a signal. And signals that are being entering a single moment through different dimensions. And the reason I'm using dimensions, the reason I'm even entertaining a multidimensionality, is because when I decided to be completely honest with myself, I noticed everything, or the game of meaning, is that it's literally oscillating between the known and the unknown. The moment you realize something intelligent and unknown is happening here in
this world of ours, your attitude from the being defining itself based on the findings of a singular dimension go away, right? Like someone not believing that we're multidimensional beings, it's like you have five senses, right? But you only believe in like your sight, right? Imagine somebody, they touched something but they couldn't see it and they believed it. The soul is in the business, this is a humorous way of saying it, but the soul is in the business of conversion of image into a sort of dynamism. Like when I think about my body, the physical purpose is kind of like obvious, but when I think about the purpose of my mind, the person's like, okay, my body exists, I'm a member of an evolutionary species, 4.5 billion years in the making, right? So the act is like, be smart enough and try to, continue and expand, the human species. That means, honor not just your ancestors, but your great-grandchildren, I have prayed for not just my own future, but for the future of the world where the definition of me is arising. And when I say pray, like, maybe I should share this, I don't want to reveal too much about myself. I'm kidding, I'm saying that after 2,000 talks, honestly, I have felt tired of how the inner realms are so limitless and there's endless possibilities, endless angles to a single moment. But at the same time, there's like a simple existence, it's like consciousness is living and watching two films at the same time. Right now, I'm an actor. I'm an actor in the film of my physical life, like physical existence, where I'm like a podcaster in this lifetime, Imagine two enlightened, let's say, Buddhist monks who, imagine two enlightened human beings who remembered their past lives. They were like, complaining about like how inconvenient their day was, right? It's like one let's say one soul would be like, man, my past life I was an emperor. In this life, I'm an office clerk, or imagine somebody says, in my past life I was a king, and now I'm a an Uber driver. Like, what I'm trying to say is like, there's a moment where you can't do anything in it, and in that moment there's strangely the humility to discover the nature of direct experience of life being the inseparability of things. It's like our body exists to show us what we are a part of, but the mind exists to show us what we are separate from, and it's like they say, who was it, like this character Tyrion in Game of Thrones was like, you sharpen your mind with books or something, really it's just a lot of life is repetitive. Ridiculous amount of what is living as a human being, thinking it has free will, it's cycling. The person's like, I'm not a I don't own a bicycle, but I've been a karmic cyclist since the end of time. Another way viewers can see like what I'm trying to convey in this episode. It's like I'm someone who realized that the edge of the meaning of life, the edge of the the edge of any sort of meaning in this life comes back to what is there to see it. It's like I'm trying to say, in an instant awareness to how everything being, there is no personality there. There are dehumanized states of consciousness, or think of it this way, there are many altered states of human consciousness, but in some of these altered states of consciousness, the consciousness can function in a dehumanized framework. To give a playful example, one of my own, let's say, poetically metaphysical experience is that I have had moments where, just like how I'm being this biological body and being this podcaster right now in the moment, I have had the same sort of attention to how I have been a geometrical being, but the secrets of geometry lead to space. That means, imagine someone looking for the most beautiful shape and they had seen the greatest, the most incredible, let's say the most beautiful shape in reality. The next beautiful thing after that is like, what is the shape of space? This is a question I wish I could ask. My physics teachers. Before I gave these talks, I was really drawn by becoming an engineer. But something happened where I realized that the limitations of physical reality, sure, they deserve to be explored, but there isn't enough people exploring the limitations of, I would say, the abstract realities that are holding reality. Pretty much imagine someone having an opportunity to advance physicalism, advance the bodies of mankind, or advance the minds of mankind. At least in this life, I don't know parallel in my other parallel lives, but the decision for this parallel life's we need to advance communication, or we need to advance the communication of the users of any technology in this world, so that when the technology advances, we do not fear what we have created as if we have no freedom. We are living at a time where man's creativity can also shackle him, I think true mysticism and true metaphysical inquiry begins when the person realizes nothing can be nothing. And then the mind has accepted the simplest truth. Because right now, am I being matter, or am I being the space where matter is? And if I am space, I am free. But if I am a shape, I am conditionally bound to the laws that move that shape. It's like after the person had read every, let's say, ancient, mystical, sacred text, in reality, the person realized it's the language of sight. So if people are seeking truth through, like, language, trying to read a book to find truth, I'm telling you, the greater mysteries activate when you wonder about why your sight is being your sight. when you wonder about why your mind moves the way it does. Pretty much what tends to happen is that if people go on into the future distrusting civilization, the more and more they distrust civilization, they reach a point where they try to seek the freedom of the experience of civilization internally. So what that means is, I'll give you an example. For example, Iran is a country which right now in the news there's like protests happening. And Iran is a theocratical society, which is another way of saying past ideology is filtering the laws of the political system. Now, it's kind of this situation where people have access to YouTube, to technology, and they can see how free other people are living in other countries, but they cannot experience it in their own country, right? So to me, it's kind of like this situation where an ideology is controlling human behavior more than the human being realizing we are travelers through ideology. People are not a photograph of them. You know, it's like, I hate to break it down to anybody who's taken a selfie or a photo of themselves. That photo is not you. The awareness to how you are a changing being is you. A beautiful story I have heard is that there was this Zen master, or I shouldn't say Zen master, there was this person who went into the forest and suddenly found a moment in life where there was no inconvenience. Found a moment in life that was perfect unconditionally before conditionally trying to fix the imperfection. This man went into the forest, attained inner peace, and one day opened his eyes and realized that so many human beings, like moths gathering around a flame, had come to become his disciple. This is an old Zen story I'm telling the viewers. I think the context is in Zen, but it could be in India, who knows. But anyways, so there's this man. This man who is living the monk's life, and he goes in nature and he cultivates such inner peace with reality that he suddenly realizes he has hundreds and hundreds of disciples. Let's say like 400 disciples. Now, out of all these disciples, there was a disciple that had been one of the first disciples who was always smiling, and everybody among all the disciples of, let's say, the sage, right? This enlightened, let's say the sage, out of all of his disciples, there was one disciple that was always smiling. Whether something good happened, bad happened, fortune, misfortune, whatever happened, everybody called this guy the smiling disciple. Now, winter comes and the emperor has heard of this, let's say, sage's wisdom, and the emperor invites the sage and all of his disciples to come to the kingdom, take refuge for the winter and be well treated, and then go back into, let's say, when the weather's good, go back into the forest and live there, let's say, sadhu lifestyle. So, what ends up happening is that the king that has made this proposal, that has invited this sage, is a person who in his inner realms is experiencing a level of complexity where he has to worry about, all his wives and how they each want to forward their own prince. And there's people in the court and political situations with other nations, and this king's mind is heavily burdened. So he's like, okay, let's bring an enlightened man here, So he invites the sage accepts, and the monks come, but the king is so busy with all his affairs that actually winter comes and passes, and the sage and the disciples are about to leave, and last second the king appears and says, "Oh, sage." And imagine at this point in the story, the sage is an old man. He says, "Sage, you are an old man. Why not stay here and serve your king, the king of the land, and let your disciples go back in the forest?" So pretty much the king invites this sage, where a lot of people are gathered around, who had disciples, to be part of his council, to be a voice of wisdom for his moment. Imagine in the future, even celebrities will have, let's say, wise, entourages or something. It's like, is that a Zen monk standing behind, a famous celebrity? It's like, yes, it is, But anyways, get back to the story. So the king says, "Be part of my council," and the old sage realizes he's an old man, and he takes the moment as if it's, truth is speaking in every moment. So he looks at the smiling disciple and he says, "Take everybody back. You have cultivated the most inner peace out of everyone. You lead the rest." The smiling disciple and all the disciples go back. The sage becomes part of the council of the king, and years go by, and the king's decisions have become better, and life has cultivated, and all the disciples went back into the forest and cultivated wisdom, cultivated inner peace. And so years have passed by, and the smiling sage has come to visit his old master. Excuse me, the smiling disciple has come to visit the old sage. And what happens is that the old sage is talking about the burdens of being old, right? It's just, talking, and every moment the smiling disciple who's always smiling looks at the sage, and he says, "Oh, what happiness. Oh, what happiness," as if it's like he's found some next level happiness. Okay. So in this story, the king suddenly walks into the palace room where the smiling disciple and, let's say, the sage are having tea, and the sage is too old to bow, so the king in some sense just nods, he bows at the sage, right, like a slight bow, and he suddenly realizes that the smiling disciple is acting as if a king didn't just enter the room. So the smiling disciple doesn't show any honor or anything to the king, and he just looks at his master and he says, "Oh, what happiness." And the king, who has a kingly ego, he looks at the situation and he looks at the sage and he says, "Your disciple has sat around doing nothing for so long that he thinks it's like he can just experience happiness. He thinks that he's found happiness." And before the king just goes on this rant against, "How dare you, smiling disciple, not bow to your king," something like that, the sage stops the king, the angry king, and says, "This smiling disciple used to be a man who was escorted by armored guards. He used to be the most powerful human being on the planet. He used to be a king, and so he renounced the kingly life to, in some sense, for the royalty of true peace, of true happiness." You see, the legend of true happiness, it exists. So it's pretty much this idea that, even if you're a king of a dimension, there's a wisdom beyond the crown. The nature of the mind is to use space to create something. Part of its creation is how it's maintaining reality. If we take the archetype, let's say the yogic archetypes of the god Brahman, the god Vishnu, and the god Shiva, Brahman was seen as the creator archetype, Vishnu was seen as the maintainer archetype, and Shiva was seen as the destroyer archetype. Now, if we take these three archetypes and in some sense apply them to the nature of human intelligence, it would be as if part of what the mind is providing for consciousness, for its own consciousness, is an experience of a world that has a dimension of creation, has a dimension where whatever's been created is being maintained, and a dimension of destruction. And it's like this poetic view where anybody who believed in the logos, it's another way of saying there's three types of logos. Pretty much the intelligent rhythms of the universal sector that maintain the shape of the universal sector. And it's like your mind having a dimension where things are only being created, having a dimension where things are only being maintained, and having a dimension where everything's being destroyed. So it's like this strange view where the mind has a chaotic quality and an ordered quality and is bridging both qualities. So we are not chaotic or ordered beings, but hilariously we have the potential to be any sort of being between this spectrum of chaotic self and ordered self. I feel knowledge may lead to technologies that heal the body, but the unknown is where the mind heals itself. You know, the nature of the mind is that even if it wants to be known, it wants to be known in accordance to what it expected. How far can the intelligence of a species go? To take this towards a mystical angle, it's like, what do you do when you realize you're not a story, a character in a story? What do you do when you realize you're not an actor in a film? And what do you do when you realize the audience that is watching the film of reality is not in the reality? If the secret of, like, think of it this way, God is inconceivable. Like, theologically, think of it this way, God is inconceivable. God, which is an inconceivable being, gave its own quality, gave a soul from man. That means an inconceivable being gave an inconceivable power to a possibility, a shaped possibility. Was it? I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson, the founder of American Transcendentalism, where he said a person's relationship with their own soul is their connection to God. So a relationship of the soul is what is inconceivably watching an invisible film administer a visible one. See, that's where the soul, it's like right now, if people think it's like, we don't know what the soul is, like, I'm telling you, the soul is just a realization that there is an unknown variable to our conclusion on the meaning of what is going on. The soul is the 100% unknown part of you. And it's kind of like the unknown is using the known until it realizes it is the unknown using the known. When it realizes it is the unknown using the known cannot fear the unknown. You know, Papaji, this yogi, he has this remarkable quote where he says, "You are the unchanging awareness where all activity takes place." That unchanging awareness for me has come to a point where I'm like, okay, it's not a language in an unknown spotlight. It is not an object like a how do I say it? I've reached a point where it's not how the ideas come to me that are fascinating. It's how my moment is being anything at all that fascinates me. It's like all souls seem to be inspired by the fascination, by the greatest fascination of their unknown expectation on reality. You know, it's kind of like music, okay? So think of me being a biological entity, that's like one instrument, right? And then me being a psychological entity, that being another instrument, and me being the soul, poetically being like the conductor. Do you know? It's like what is actually living life is not something that can only use its effects to explain the cause. You see, when we try to reverse engineer what life was in the past, we are actually re-engineering how that life could be. You know, it's like the person, you know, the existence of their body was the proof that they are a body. The awareness that the free will moving the body is the proof of the existence of our mind, or how our mind is experiencing our existence. Now, imagine you're someone who has cultivated enough mastery, as if the outer realms was a sword, and the outer realms were a shield, and the inner realms were a sword. And imagine you had a warrior that had mastered your ability to use your inner realms and outer realms. Eventually, what are you left, or where does it take you? It's kind of like the poet Rumi explains it beautifully, where he says, just like a bird needs two wings to fly, the mind requires chaos and order to function. So similarly, it's like once a being has cultivated mastery of their outer dimensions and has cultivated mastery of their inner dimensions, then it becomes a situation where the game of chaos and order, it's like the concept of a victory and a loss go away, right? It becomes a sort of instantaneous trust that is being the moment, rather than a shifty movement that it has no conviction in the effects of its movement. It's like the effect can never explain the cause, but it harbors within it how the cause became the effect. What I'm trying to say is that who we are is an unknown way to know the unknown. We're reaching that point. It's such a cool time to be alive, right? Think of it this way. Right now in Canada, there's, or at least like a couple years ago, there was this whole ordeal about, you know, modern feminism and what do you call it? like liberal pronouns and whatnot. And I'm realizing that we are reaching a point where, aside from our biological existence, our minds are like eagles flying in a sky, and they can choose to land on any branch they want. I'm kind of saying that in the middle of a battle where people are like, I'm this, I'm that, it's as if, imagine someone comes and says, I don't know what I am, what do I do? Imagine you don't know what the mind is. Imagine you don't know what kind of being you are. Imagine you don't know what is looking out through your eyes. And people are like, what do you identify as, They asked the yogi, it's like, what's your pronoun? And the yogi was like, Parabrahman, Atman, just like next level fucking, excuse my language, but next level, existence. For the body is a display, but for the mind, it is an opportunity. The purpose of free will is to move Earth, to move a little part of Earth. Like, how adorable is human consciousness? 4.5 billion years of sophisticated evolution. Let's say, like, fascinating evolution, and the creature's like, all right, what do I do with myself right now? So we evolve. Like, think about it, guys. The purpose of individual consciousness is so bizarre, right? Because the psychology of the human being is trying to run away from pain. Like, that is so bizarre to me. Why an unconscious evolving creature chose to become conscious so it could know it's suffering. Consciousness is like, nature was like, I'm gonna feel pain now, I'm gonna feel pleasure now, right? And it's as if, like, why? Do you know, like, right now we can't consciously, like, move our heart. It's like a lot of the body's activity is involuntarily happens, but why is the consciousness capable of moving, let's say, the complete body? There's a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche I have to read right now. The poet Friedrich Nietzsche says, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. What has the mind of the human being done with limitation? We have used it to discover the limitless. We are living in the silliest phase of human history. Super silly. Like our great-grandchildren, thousands of years from now, they're gonna look at people alive in 2022 and be like, look at these silly, animals. Like, because I'm telling you, the fascination we should have for how mysterious our own minds has not been enough, or has not been stronger than the conviction that an ideological story is the edge of our soul. Do not fear the unknown, for we have all come from it, Guys, I might just rename this episode to the awareness to the image of life is the soul. Or maybe I should rewrite it as the soul is the awareness to the image of life. I mean, the instantaneous certainty of an image being reality is the divine. I mean, that's a good title too, but anyways. What else can I say about instantaneous enlightenment? They asked Kabir, this yogi, they're like, one of his disciples, like pretty much some guy came up to Kabir, this enlightened being, and he's like, yo, Kabir, how long does it take to get enlightened? And Kabir, you know, like kind of, what's his name? Just like a Robert De Niro movie. Kabir, like, as if he's like, you talking to me, you know? Kabir just looks at the guy and he says, you want to know how long it takes to get enlightened? It's half of an instant. That means any truth that is not instantaneously true is not a truth. How we know imagination is real because we can close our eyes and see something, and that image appears in a space, in the space of an unknown first-person viewer. Think of it this way, that right now we're living in civilization 1.0 and this is the prototype. This is the best our ancestors could do. And so we imagine 8 billion human beings being like, what if instantly we could reset the context of the human species towards the victory of all dimensions of conscious life? It's like we don't just want to be good human beings on Earth. We want to be the greatest beings in the universal sector. The greatest in accordance to the potential of our circumstance. You know, for someone who gives up, everything can be a failure. But someone who has cultivated endless effort, it's like at some point, if you stay true to the simplest dimensions of your being, the most complex dimensions are automatically handled. Like karma realigns in accordance to, think of it this way, the more your inner realms are waiting for the outer realms to move, and then your conscious meaning is being projected, the more free you are. You know, imagine in the future they will write in books, the mystical podcasters of 2022 suggested the advancement of civilization was the only path, you know. You know, this might sound bizarre, but I feel a species wanting to consciously and efficiently and benevolently, because it's smart enough, I feel a religious experience is a sort of advancement. And if we decide that the future can be better than how the past conditioned us, the whole purpose of free will is for intelligence to experience itself stepping away from nature. You see, guys, just like how we can create this story and mythos that, you know, we are destined to be natural beings till the end of time, there could simultaneously be this mythos that nature was never nature. That means if an unknown witness superseded it's like when one ponders about the primordial, how an image is being how an image is being present in the moment is the only truth. It's the nature of attention. Like right now, I'm looking at my computer screen. I'm closing my eyes right now, and I'm seeing the image of the computer screen. I ask myself, where am I seeing this image? I discover the mind is connected. It's like people think when they close their eyes they don't see anything, but you access a subtle space where memories, ideas, kind of like signals coming in and out for the antenna, come and go. Our mind is access to a dimension where many probabilities of reality can exist, and what intelligence means, or who leaders should be, are those who see the most dimensions in the field they're leading. To me, the greatest beings of the planet are beings where greatness is like second nature. Why? Because nature is great. I don't know, like the species has evolved also through a massive kind of ritualistic, like repetitive psychological structure, I guess. I don't know how to say it. Like our ancestors, it's like the intelligence that is moving through the DNA has not forgotten its journey. Do you know? It's kind of like our body has a hidden knowing, our mind has a hidden knowing, poetically the soul. Where can I take my attention? Or where can I go that I have never been before? The presence of attention is space. Existence is happening in the space where consciousness observes, and then the free will becomes its decision. And advanced humanity is coming soon to a civilization near you. Seriously, like we are at that point where the species has to step out of the cocoon of the past. the era of the multidimensional human being is here. We all know it. We all know that who we have been has not been a name celebrating its birthday. We say my body, my mind, my soul, my birthday, my reality, my truth. Who's that my that is holding all of this? The true nature of our sight. And you may be a person where the unique thing about karma is it's like a poker game where different cards have been dealt. Some people in their lifetime, they need to go all in. And some people need to fold, But ultimately, everybody is given unique circumstances. Being a biological creature is like the most bizarre thing, But bizarre from what context? It's kind of like, nowadays psychologists are talking a lot, but usually psychologists are silent people. And why? Because people would ask them, so what has psychology discovered? And the psychologist, imagine, would be quiet. Why? Because the bizarre truth is that when an ideological entity wonders about where ideas come from, it cannot ignore how a beam of its attention is holding the ideology in the moment. We are like what sight is attention being the shape of space. Being the shape of everything in space. It's very hard for me to say, does my body only belong as a part of my mind, or does the world belong as a part of my mind? Right now, am I the universe giving this talk, or am I a sleepless podcaster? It's like I don't know. Something that I feel like what's really going on Earth is that the species is awakening from the enchantment from its linguistic slumber. It's like we are like a bear in hibernation, and a bear in hibernation is not the full ability of the bear. Right? So we are like advanced beings in hibernation, and it's like civilization. It's like all I'm trying to say is, if there was a more advanced being, could there be a possibility that we are also being it? Imagine aliens land on Earth, and the aliens have an ego problem, and this is a few sci-fi example, but I'm saying, imagine aliens land on Earth, and there's that moment where the leaders of humanity are talking to, let's say, the alien leaders, and the aliens are like, we're angry and we don't like Earthlings, and we're going to invade you, right? We're going to invade you as aliens, right? So imagine the aliens say this to the leaders of humanity, and the leaders of humanity are like, who are you invading? Can you tell us who you think we are? Right? And imagine after a long discussion, the alien invaders decide not to invade because they realize how far and how deeply the eyes of the human species is actually open. It's like the type of human beings we are seeing now, it's like the tip of the iceberg situation. It's kind of like we have to have personality be artificial, unnatural. We have to have civilization be unnatural so we can awaken from it to know that we are not it, right? Because, somebody may wonder about why isn't a species staying true to itself, to its nature, and at the same time, why shouldn't the species lie to itself? It's like, imagine somebody makes an argument, you gotta step out, escape a simulation. You gotta step out of a simulation. Imagine somebody makes the argument, no, the purpose of a simulation is to create infinite simulations. Who know the desires of an eternal and infinite being are different. 2022 is an era where there is so many, it's the era of hidden lives. The discovery of the true nature. That the experience, the multidimensionality of the experience of life is the birthright of our species. You see, it's not that greatness is an egoic thing. The person's like, I want to be great. The person's like, when the world is great, then failure in a great world is not failure. An advanced civilization, there would be no longer good or evil people in it, or if there were, there would be infinite levels to it. Imagine somebody was being like, 7,155 level of evil or good, What is here now? And why are the songs of the advanced civilization being heard? Mr. Within is the archetype that the potential of what is within us is the greatness of all of us. That means, is the human species smart enough to build a civilization where it's a win-win strategy? Like, think about this, it's like what humanity has been missing is great visionary blueprints to the potentials of it. I hope that a majority of the fans of my work, on these podcasts, and it's as if I'm speaking to futurists. That's really who I'm looking. Anybody who loves the future has completed their karmic moment. Because that's the only thing where emotions still can't be convinced, right? The person's like, am I going to fear what happens after death or what happens as death? Or am I going to love reality before the curtains are pulled? It's as if at some point the person has to wonder where their emotions are coming from. And emotions are like the ears of the free will. And thoughts are like the voice of the free will. It's like we are an unknown being that we can't know who we truly are, but we can look at the effect of truth, which is our actions, and get a sense. It's as if what the shaman was doing was looking at the whole moment as the whole signal of meaning. It might be kind of strange, but what is really speaking to the viewers right now in this moment, as convincing as the physical life, the invisible life are, it's inconceivable. We are a miracle being live streamed. That's what consciousness is. It is paradoxical to the chained duality. We have to free our minds from simulations of the world to come to the realization in the honesty of an unknown moment. What does the unknown deserve? Imagine the intelligence that's functioning through the human existence is like, it realizes how it's experiencing existence is not existential. We are timelessly being creatures in time because space was primordial. It's primordial to matter. It's before stuff could be anywhere. There needed to be an anywhere where stuff could be in. There needed to be a room before the furniture could be put in. And when we look at the cosmos, we wonder about how the furniture got here. Some people say there was a big bang, and it's suddenly the furniture was in the room, and others say it's like the furniture came into the room by a specific god or something. What I'm trying to say is that once the species stops language worship it gives its intelligence an opportunity to reset the frame of how the self is happening. You see, every person, their DNA being a unique antenna, at the same time is being a sort of unique receiver of a dimension of the world. That means it's like one way to look for other dimensions is to try to find secret worlds and portals, right? The other way to find another dimension is to notice how you are being a world as the actual world is happening. We are inside the simulations of how far our inner eyes can see, deciding the limits of what the unknown world beyond the veil of sensory perception is. When the skies become the poetry of the voice of mankind, where we are literally going to live in the sky. I'm giving this talk in a balcony, but it might as well be a sky city, because sight starts from how it has entered the room. Who a person is how their attention moves. And so, karma is like a boat, it's like you're on a boat, and where the boat is going, it's as if it's like the person's looking for the captain of the ship of their story of life and realize they are the captain. And it's like that moment of self-authorization, of self-authority, right? Because really what freedom actually looks like is a being that is free from conditions that define how it's being. The nature of our attention is a transcendental light beam piercing, the dark skies of unknown dimensions. We are living in a question mark, like an exclamation point, and we've forgotten the mysteries of the realm. There's really two sources of honor. What's the greatest known strategy, and what is the greatest unknown strategy? The greatest unknown strategy, the Taoists, the yogis, the oneness people all figured out. But the unknown strategy of life is not to just be in a certain state 24/7. It's another way of saying, realizing that it's kind of like your soul is singing a different song than your mind, and your body is singing a different song than, let's say, your mind, right? So it's like you begin to hear the true music of your own soul, and that's when poetically all karmic turbulence for the pageant of consciousness has disappeared, Because to me, I think on some deep level, a part of me feels like an artist, in the sense that the canvas is just consciousness. It's as if every action is an energetic result of how something moved in the world. Literally, every move we make is like the paintbrush moving on the empty canvas of space, of the space-time continuum. There's moments where I have inner visions, and a vision that has really influenced me, and kind of many times before I give a talk, I see this vision in my inner realms, and then I know I need to go give the talk. Okay. And so many times I've had this inner vision where it's as if someone is holding a door open and is just waiting, because the door is not being held for the person opening it, but it's being held for the future to enter the present. You see, it's like a species that was destroying itself because of its past, would suddenly, like, the universe would balance it out poetically by sending time travelers from the future to convince itself that in some sense the past is not the ruler of our life. You see, it's very bizarre. It's like the past has passed, all our past experiences are finished, but we have access to them. We can see them, right? We can, like, a person can remember how their eyes felt when they looked like 10 years ago, you know. You know, when a person frees themselves from the concept of duality, something very strange happens. One's friends and enemies disappear. All chaotic geometry and, let's say, symmetrical ordered geometry, all geometry disappears. The straight lines and curvy lines of karma. Good and evil are like paint, you know, they're kind of like every action we make, it's like with what kind of paint did we use, with what sort of intent did the soul move in the moment. It's so remarkable that light hits an object that pre-exists before the light, and then that object receives the light. So it's like the divine mystery is how we know that we know, or how we can even do anything at all. You see, guys, I'm trying to get the species from its ideological worship of a specific story, or of just one type of story. I'm trying to free the mind of the species to how its future is where possibility lives, you know. You know, on another cool title we can give the human being is that human beings were attention wielders. You know, just like we held the sword and shield, our attention held the moment in certain states. In some sense, based on distrust and trust, the shield and the sword rises. When eternity remembers itself, it does not fear its temporary life, and so through the fruition, it's as if before the person experienced their karma in their inner realms, they experienced their karma. What the mind grants is an ability for consciousness to use life in a way where it has already simulated it. Pretty much what research means is that the person's trying to see more simulations of a reality. It's like the world is real, but how we're looking at it isn't. And so we're like, what do we do about the mystery of consciousness? let me try a different approach. Let's say someone has come, let's say right now we had built an advanced civilization. And so maybe in the next upcoming talks, I'm gonna try to speak less about an advanced civilization, more with the assumption that what would it be like to be in one. Energy is using language to find a way to accept how unknown it's being. So no amount of knowledge will be enough if the person has not realized the presence of the unknown. I think that would be kind of like one of my final teachings. You reach the presence of the unknown, and then what moves the moment is not the past anymore. Friedrich Nietzsche says, "I am not upset that you lied to me. I am upset that from now on I can't believe you." Friedrich Nietzsche says, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." Wow. Wow. Friedrich Nietzsche was like a genius. It's like genius or time traveler. It's like the future has to choose one, you know. Sorry guys, I'm just editing the title right now. So I thought I'd do it.
What else can I do that hasn't been done? Friedrich Nietzsche says, "There's always some madness in love, but there's also always some reason in madness." Friedrich Nietzsche says whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster, and if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. Friedrich Nietzsche says, "You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist." Friedrich Nietzsche says sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. Friedrich Nietzsche says, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." That means if we have an explanation for reality, we'll have confidence in it. If we can understand how something moves, like pretty much that's the hunter's psychology, right? Like as hunters, who was it? I think it was Terence McKenna. He said something fascinating, that human psychology was dependent on, the hunter's mind was dependent on how its prey's mind worked. Like how the prey's mind moved. So we are actually masters at watching how lesser dimensions move. But now we have to use our mastery of lesser dimensions to see how greater the dimensions can be in a time of history where the linguistic simulation is finally beginning to crack. It's like the walls of an artificial paradise collapse into, the opportunity of a reality. Friedrich Nietzsche says some people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. Friedrich Nietzsche says he who has a... I read that. Anyways, I'll keep going. Friedrich Nietzsche said, "In heaven, all the interesting people are missing." Friedrich Nietzsche says there are no facts, only interpretations. Friedrich Nietzsche says the man of knowledge must be able not only to love his enemies, but also to hate his friends. I mean, I have this attitude that to establish a subjective relationship with an intelligence that has unknown dimensions could be a self-made game. It's like the search of an honest being for truth. It's like the simplicity of the universe is its honesty, and the complexity of the universe is the destiny of all lies. Imagine any person who lies. It's as if they kind of shape a destiny for themselves. Friedrich Nietzsche says when we are tired, we're attacked by ideas we conquered long ago. Friedrich Nietzsche says the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Friedrich Nietzsche says when we are... I read that. Jesus. Friedrich Nietzsche says we should consider every day lost on which we have not danced at least once. Friedrich Nietzsche says, I cannot believe in a God who wants to be praised all the time. Friedrich Nietzsche says the snake which cannot cast its skin has to die, as well the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind.
Friedrich Nietzsche says, in individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. Friedrich Nietzsche says no one can construct for you the bridge upon which precisely you must cross the stream of life. No one but you yourself alone. Friedrich Nietzsche says, is man merely a mistake of gods, or God merely a mistake of man? Friedrich Nietzsche says the surest way to corrupt a youth is instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. This is like every parent should know this. You know what it is? It's as if, does freedom mean ideological cloning, or does freedom mean, the wonder of each of our inner realms performs in the outer realms? The outer realms is a stage where there is enough freedom for a benevolent advanced civilization to become the captain of the destiny of the human species. You see, we need a new structure. Why? Because we can fathom it. There's a question in philosophy which is just the word why question mark, and then the only response to it that's proper is why not, right? And for me, I realize, why not an advanced civilization? This is why the advanced civilization is the only idea I feel I have something to say. Everything else is like acting in accordance to its own nature, right? What cyberspace has done has allowed the inner realms of one. It's as if the purpose of the internet is to be able to 100% 24/7 live stream everything about reality. Cyberspace's agenda is to copy reality. And then human beings who become defined by cyberspace, there it's like a sort of archetype is created. What really is genius is ability. We are creatures that deep down are fascinated by ability and the possibility of the replication of that ability. It's like not only archetypes are being worn like masks, put on the face of an unknown soul, an unknown sight in the realm. Behind our eyes, we are the king on the throne of our inner realms. In front of our eyes, we are the servants of the greatest vision. So it's another way of saying a person's greatest understanding of their own mind and greatest understanding of the body will bring them to a state where in that state, the greatest understanding of all the interactions of the body and mind become suddenly fascinating. So at some point when let's say somebody spiritually ran after truth, it's like after some point the images are cast aside and the person realizes that everything, when it comes to consciousness, every moment is a new moment, and that the past is the present is the simulation of the future. If the past is the simulation of the present, the logos is how the future is simulating the present. And what the future of our species is, it goes beyond the language threshold. In accordance to the Kardashev scale, it would be a type 6. It would be like a beyond 6 type civilization. It's the journey of an attention that exists in a world where activities can occur. There is enough of a balance of gravity for the human being to, in some sense, like sometimes I think, sure, if the gravity of the planet was less, maybe people would be happier, but like, in the simplicity of the world, our complexity restored to its original nature. What I'm trying to say is we're living as personalities, thinking we're just the free will's actions, the free will's programming, but in reality, what we are spaces where unique reality can happen. We are the miracle that is aware of all the other miracles, you know. It's kind of like before the concept of a self in a world, before the language that could make us a species worship a book. It's like the person wonders about, you know, the best case scenario. Now we just need to do it for our existential situation. When the spirit of the advanced civilization is found, we discover where the potential of the cosmos is going. We human beings are ambassadors of a visible dimension, simultaneously ambassadors in an invisible dimension in the inner realms. And you could say simultaneously, the viewer beyond time that holds time. It's as if the person's like, okay, if I'm a creature in time, what is aware of time before I was aware of time? It's all how we translate a direct human experience into, let's say, an indirect linguistic psychological outline. How we are associating matter with personality and geometry at the same time. The person's like, they taught me what an atom looks like, you know, in science textbooks, but they didn't tell me what, in some sense, the awareness, the shape looks like. The mysteries of our realm, we are living in it's like pretty much the species is blindfolding itself with the misery of the past. It's like suffering based on the past as being an excuse for a future, for a potential future of the species not to activate. It's all about the quality of the human experience, you know. It's like what kind of human beings deserve this world they're in. You know, it's like what kind of a human being, you know, or what kind of an intelligence could, in appreciation of everything that exists, it's as if what is that attention that holds all dimensions at the same time, you know? It's like wondering about your mind's mind to the power of infinity, or wondering about the mysteries of how existence is being. You know, it's as if the instantaneous cannot be worshipped, but the dualistic can. It's like the species awakens from the enchantment of language, and a new strength is found. It's as if the question in our subconscious the whole time that we've been in the conscious waking state as an entity, you know, it's kind of like, what have we been alive for? And this is where honor is found. That's a question that restores honor. You know, it's like the person's like, I'm using the past to value the present. I could be super zen and allow the present to just be the present, or I could use the future to reorchestrate how the past needs to move the present. You see, the idea is self-acceptance, but the self is in, like, there's infinite parallel universes to the self. The person, like, believes in parallel, imagine someone believing in parallel universes and believing in enlightenment, and they're like, no way, all my infinite parallel versions of me need to get enlightened too. Like, what is this? So at some point, the attention, rests in the singular, discovers the infinity behind the void. And mankind was never a story of lost souls. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was worthy enough to convince you to go buy a sketchbook where you, whenever you have visions or any sort of content in your inner realms, you write it in that book. You'll be fascinated of how many dimensions of intelligence it takes our brain to juggle at the same time for it to be able to take the information of each of its senses and to project them at the same time. The brain is taking everything in it's like the brain is found in an unknown world. It's scanning the whole unknown world in one moment and then living in that. Our brain literally takes simulates reality and lives in those simulations, And really, it's kind of like, was truth, a forgotten legend? Or would the era of the advanced humanity imply that the whole time we have been living for ourselves, in order to live for our future? It says, imagine you were such an advanced being that you had managed the past, the present, and now only the future remained. Visionaries are found in the way Shakespeare says, some people are born great, some people achieve greatness, and some people have greatness thrust upon them. Visionaries are human beings that experience multiple life cycles of inner realm simulation of reality. So the person is experiencing a completely different world behind their eyes than in front of it, and they're experiencing the karma of how their attention identifies with their inner realms or identifies with the outer realms. And ultimately, it's all in the presence of attention. It's kind of like, like a good way to say what enlightenment seems to be. Actual enlightenment is it's like a bird that is simultaneously flapping the simulation and the truth. It's kind of like we are the witness of the duality that was separating, that was creating the dualistic situation of a truth and illusion. It's as if when we realize from the original earth we are finding ourselves in simulations of the earth, then something completely different happens. Through the honor of the potential of nature, we step into technology. It's as if something technology did not expect, the embrace of nature. In the future, extraterrestrials may realize there's enough compassionate human beings on the planet for a better world. Or excuse me, AI. The paint on the paintbrush fades. The pilot lands the voice into silence. And the songs of the advanced civilizations are heard. Rise, mankind, rise. Namaste.